If you want to smack your submissive and you want to achieve a certain effect, you have to pay attention to what's happening as you smack them, right? You spank them too light, it's irritating. You spank them too hard, they shut down. So a subsequent smacks feel different. They're in a different state of consciousness. You get it just right. You want to get it. You want to have the effect you want to have, right? That like you're the doer in that moment. So in beautiful, natural harmony, you with all the authority, all of the power, all of the decision-making are absolutely 100% beholden to, you are in that tiny way a slave to your sub.
You're listening to The Madeline Moon Show, the podcast that will show you how to become masterful at making art out of love, life, and everything that comes your way. Kasia Urbaniak is the founder and CEO of The Academy, a school that teaches women the foundations of power and influence. Over the course of nearly 20 years, she has worked as a professional dominatrix, practiced Taoist alchemy in one of the oldest female-led monasteries in China, and obtained dozens of certifications in different disciplines, including medical qigong and systemic constellations. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Madeline Moon podcast. It is so good to have you here today, because today is a very, very special day. I mean, I'm talking maybe one of the most special days we've had on the podcast, because today we have Kasia here to speak about power dynamics and role play in the theater of power. And I think this might be one of the most important things that women today can learn. What you offer, how you offer it, the unique lens that you offer it, the background that you have of how you learn to offer what you offer is incredible. And I don't say that to everybody. Like, I'm deeply grateful to have you on this show because your work is pivotal for women. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So good to have you here. So, I want to start off with, again, not always something I ask people about, but I want to start with your story. Like, what led you to learn about power dynamics for women and men, obviously. I mean, you have deep, extensive knowledge and all sorts of dynamics, gender dynamics and power dynamics, which are not the same thing, I've learned because of you. But what got you into this body of work, this unique intersection that you now teach?
Oh, yeah. It was an accident. I was young and wanted to and needed to believe that magic was real. And it wasn't really enough for me to have a magical feeling. I needed to know if something else was possible. And I think a lot of people feel that drive, that kind of like, this can't be it. And it shows up in different ways. And for me, it came up as I have to go find the most magical beings on the earth and go study with them, no matter what it takes. I have to see what are the limits of human potential and how far can this go. But I was 19 years old. And it turns out that going to study in all these far-flung places in the world is expensive. And the way I could find to fund it was by working as a professional dominatrix in New York City, which is where I was, and it just seemed like the logical thing to do. And there was this long period of time where I was going back and forth between really intense money-making, concentrated sessions of BDSM and really concentrated, intense sessions of training to capitalize on getting the most out of each. And what I didn't realize until a certain point was not only that I was really getting a lot out of both, but that the diagnostic abilities that I was being trained in the monasteries, for example, to be able to like see what's happening in somebody's organs, in their body, in their energetic system, or in more martial arts capacity, just being able to sense things and feel things was showing up in how I saw these BDSM roleplay sessions. So there was just this moment where those two paths sort of clicked in, and I felt like I had 3D vision where I was only seeing 2D vision before, where here I am like faking it, being like, hi, I'm powerful, and get on your knees. And suddenly I'm like, there is an energetic exchange happening here that's based on emotion, based on what's hidden, based on attention. That is not only palpable, but it influenced how I saw everything else in the world outside. I got so hypersensitive to these dynamics that there was a point in time where I was really even uncomfortable being in a restaurant, like watching men and women interact. I could just like feel like, see what was happening, the misunderstandings and like the power leakages. And, there are these things that once you see them, you can't unsee them. And sometimes those things, when they become native to your perception, they become so like your default mode, you cannot help but want to tell other people about it, especially when they provide a really powerful shortcut that gets rid of all this extra labor and seeking and explaining and psychological backpedaling. So I feel like I fell into, a rabbit hole, like Alice in Wonderland. And then it changed how I saw the world. And then after that, there was no going back. There was only being able to bring people with me once in a while.
What is psychological backpedaling?
I think what I meant by that is, as much as personal history is a powerful way to explain why you behave the way you do and I behave the way I do, there are certain ways of behaving in which the individual backstory doesn't actually help.
Yeah.
Because there's a bigger thing at play. So, for example, a lot of people fog out when it comes to money, right? So I teach classes on money in the power curriculum. And when women start talking about money, very often they literally start fogging out. It gets foggy in the room. And if we went into their individual stories about where that discomfort with money comes from, we could say, one will say, it's because my parents were really poor and stingy. It's because my father controlled all the money. It's because my parents had a lot of money and tried to protect me from money. And all these varied stories that don't make any sense to explain this one money fog, when the money fog does not belong to the individual. It's all of ours, right? It's like, it's a bigger thing. That's what I mean. So in power dynamics, sometimes there's something really universal going on. And then we start going like, the reason I'm having trouble in this relationship is because I don't respect myself because my parents traumatized me. And that's what I mean by like trying to deconstruct this moment in time by going inward into the past instead of looking outward at everybody else doing the same damn thing.
Yeah, I'm really following that. One of my teachers, his name is Josh Shree, and he talks about how if we want to have a real revolution of any kind, it cannot be psychologized. And we can't be focusing on me, myself, my story, my this, my that, my trauma. Like if we have a true revolution of somatics, of the body, of power, of money, of whatever it wants to be, it actually has to be coming from the collective ritual. Like how do we move together as one through the body? And the steps to the dance and the drum, that's a whole other avenue. But I get what you're saying, and I love that perspective. So I know that I'm always conscious of people who are doing podcasts all the time, of telling the very same and similar story. And I would really kick myself if we didn't go deeper into like how I see you as what your genius and your magic is. And that is in the realm of power dynamics. And it's something that is incredibly universal. It's not just personal. So the free state for woman and like being, let's go to like the foundation of like being on the spot, being put on the spot. I have to ask you about that because the way that you describe this is just so great. What happens in a woman's system when she is put on the spot? Just starting there.
So not from a nervous system expert perspective, but just from looking at energy, right? Just from looking at, let's just say, the balance of attention. So when something goes wrong, women tend to put their attention inward. And when something goes wrong, men tend to put their attention outward. Times are changing. I have explanations for why I think this happens. I think it's conditioning based. When you put a woman on the spot and say something, you are putting your attention on her. There's a weight to that. When she goes and puts attention on herself, there's double the weight of that attention on her system. It becomes much easier for her to freeze because she's seeking the answer inside. What did I do? What do I do? Why did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
If you just do an experiment and ask a series of men, one after the other, a surprising, inappropriate question, they'll tend to put their attention out. Why are you asking? What is that? Who do you think you are? Well, they won't say, who do you think you are? But they'll look out to see what's wrong with you for asking that question. Whereas a woman will seek the answer inside. That's what will have her freeze. It's a doubling down of attention. Now, for perspective, if you look at authority, leadership versus surrender and followership, both being really important moment by moment human skills in this conversation. You and I are sharing attention, right? And we are looking at each other to see if the questions are landing, if the answers are coming. Men putting their attention outward creates a feeling of authority and dominance. Putting your attention inward shifts you into a perspective and into a state that's more like prey, more like the surrendered one, right? Like you even look at animals, it's the one in charge, the mother of a pack of litter, like a litter of dogs. She has her attention out. She barks, all the pups look inward to see if they're doing the thing right, if they're in line. So when a woman's put on the spot and the attention's on her and she responds in her default mode by putting her attention on herself, she's putting herself into a more submissive state when it might be more appropriate to take the lead and say, ouch, I don't like this, right? Mm-hmm. And the way to do that is to put your attention out. So that might be difficult to imagine, but it isn't difficult to feel. When you see someone respond to an inappropriate question by going inward and freezing versus by putting their attention out and literally just saying, what had you ask me that? What are you looking for in that question? Or are your eyes blue? And that's oftentimes just enough to shift the balance of attention so the other person, their brain chemistry starts to change, even just for a moment. And if you look at a lot of the ways in which very dangerous sexual harassment scenarios develop, it usually is because of that one frozen moment. It is that moment where I didn't say stop. It's that moment where I wanted to speak, but there was nothing coming out of my mouth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'll often refer to this as like the collapsing inward. There's something wrong about me and we collapse inward on ourselves. And the angle that I often take with that is like, how do you create art through this? How do you create art as the response? But what I love so much about what you're saying is like the somatic experience of attention being off of you and an experience like that for once, And I've known about this offering in your work for a long time, and actually learning the practice of asking a question is so hard. It is so hard. And I see why people go to your containers to specifically stand there and like practice asking a question. Because I'll have these experiences where, something will be asked of me and I'll go inward or I'll just react. It's just a reaction. It's an excuse that will come out, or it's something that's just not intentional.
Yeah.
And what I love about what you're sharing is an intentional question, and that must take really deep, consistent training to get it inside of the body. Or would you say otherwise?
Not really. I mean, okay, so I know a little bit about your work, and what I love about what I believe you do is when you allow a human being to move physically through their emotions and really like inhabit wild emotional states, the liberation that comes with that is a lot bigger than one might imagine. So times are changing, but in terms of gender, women have been less allowed to be angry. Men have been less allowed to be sad and to cry. There's a lot of examples in which neither are allowed either. So let me just say that from the beginning. But if you cannot be angry all the way and express it all the way. Your facial expressions we are designed to have a thought, a feeling, and take an action. Human beings are designed that way. And we have an incredible imbalance of like thoughts, feelings, no action.
Oof.
So it really weakens our system. So you have a feeling you can't express, you have thoughts you have nothing to do with. If you're not allowed to express anger, even allowing your body to make those expressions, those moves in the privacy of your own home, your ability to move energy outward is limited. So if you sense any feeling, any emotion, all emotions have a direction. If you can't feel the direction, it's usually because you're feeling many feelings at once. There's a traffic jam. We're blocked. But if you feel anger, you can feel it moves upward and outward. If you feel sadness, you can feel literally it moves downward and inward. So your attention moves downward and inward when you're hurt or sad. Men aren't allowed to be hurt or sad, so they have less contact with the wisdom less access to that wisdom that's inside. If they were allowed to weep until they sobbed, that attention would be able to sit fully down. When I do workshops with women and they get in touch with their anger and I have them scream no and hit something with a baseball bat, that no sometimes travels 2 or 3 feet, even if the volume is loud. It's so hard for that to move outward, right? Now, if you think about leadership and surrender, if you can't move your attention outward and have the other person's body feel that they're either being watched or attended to, right? It can be like dominance and authority that feels like a little scary making, or it can be like beautiful, well-held authority. Both require that the other person feel that they're seen or watched, right? Without distinguishing between negative and positive authority or surrender, right? Like, so if you cannot put your attention out because your anger circuits are congested, because you're angry but haven't been able to make nasty facial expressions, growl and howl, you can think you're finally telling them what you think, and it's not going to land. It's going to be shrill and piercing, and it's going to have shrapnel hit everyone everywhere. It's not actually going to land. It's never going to be like, stop. It's never going to be like, no. You know, that like booming dog trainer, like, yes, go, now, no. It's never going to reach the whole body because the anger circuit's blocked. So in so many ways, this to me feels like the basic alphabet of human functioning, like the ways in which these emotions are biological and practical and functional. And there is no limit so far from what I've seen from the value of like the little piece that I know that you do in your workshops where human beings are practicing having those feelings and moving with them so those circuits are cleared so that when they speak to somebody they love and are telling the truth about how they feel inside or what they want to have happen outside, it's not just the person's brain that's metabolizing the information. They can feel what it would mean to the person they're hearing from, and they can sometimes even feel it in their body, like what they would need to do or what it's like to be in that person's shoes. It's like an education in natural empathy. And more and more, I think, as the future is coming, the word embodiment is going to become more important because we're doing it less. I don't think the word embodiment existed before technology because now we think we have these entire, you know, it's like it's going to be our medicine and our sanity. And we're going to be facing questions and problems to solve that we don't have a framework for. If you think about the gene editing that's coming and the AI issues and the technological advances and possible climate problems, all of that stuff is going to mean that the average person has to make the kinds of decisions they have never had to make before. Do I want my child to be 7 feet tall? You know, we're going to need a form of sanity. And I think that sanity starts with a self-care that is, I think that we're just like beginning to understand. And it really, really is as basic as the alphabet of embodied emotion.
Yeah. I really appreciate your leadership and forward thinking. Like, how does this body of work apply to all the things that are coming in the future so that we can best prepare, you know? Because you're right. And that's something I haven't really sat and thought about. Like, especially with so many wild doors have opened because of AI's capacity to take over on.
I recently read about IVG. You know about IVG? It's the next level of IVF, that where like eggs are no longer necessary. It's just cells. So any two humans at any age will be able to have children.
Whoa.
And like that's going to throw a wrench in the whole. Like,
got goosebumps, but like not the kind that I really want. Oh my gosh. I mean, yeah.
We're going to have to grow up so fast, Madeline. We're going to have to grow up fast, and we're going to have to know what adulthood looks like. And I don't think I think the only places we can count on are the places we can return to. I even feel like I was reading this, I think it was like, was it a German spiritual philosopher from like a few hundred years ago, where they were talking about you can't have empathy unless you can relate to another person's corporeal predicament. Meaning like you can't really feel for somebody unless you can feel for their bodily experience. What it's like to work 3 jobs, wake up in the morning, be yelled at by your kids, one of which has learning disability, or whatever the case is, whatever the story is. Like you have to be able to relate to their physical story. We forget we're bodies. We like to forget we're bodies. We have like avatar fantasies left and right, And imagination's a beautiful thing, but at the end of the day, it all comes home.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a reference point. It's like people get to create reference points for like, this is what it feels like to circulate anger in my system. This is what it feels like to say no from my womb. What you were saying earlier about it not landing, it being screechy, or it like literally cannot be received from someone that you're trying to get the message across. And this is why it's so important too to care about practicing emotion, choosing to step into emotion before emotion chooses to step into you. What is it like to create somatic sovereignty so that you know your anger, you're experiencing your anger, you're playing with your anger, you're wine and dining your anger, you're tussling with your anger. And I'll lead these. I know you're very into role play, and so you have the theatrical gene.
Yeah.
I would love to have been a fly on the wall to watch you in those dungeons, but we'll do improv at my workshops. And I love improv because it's a way you can play out these scenes that you're not experiencing in real life. You get to see how would you be in that experience if this was as real as day. And what I'll notice oftentimes with women that are getting up to, there's a twist in the scene, okay? So this person is getting all the inheritance from mom and dad. You're getting nothing. Go.
Yeah.
And how dare you? Da, da, da. Like the voice gets really loud and it can turn into somewhat of a cat fight.
Yeah.
And then we'll pause the scene and it's like, okay, where's the energy right now in your body? And like, do you feel your own presence right now? Can you feel your heart right now in this scene? And then there's like this, I was going into like habitual spaces of what I think anger is like.
Yeah.
And it's not an interesting scene.
Yeah.
So the minute that they then enter their heart, their voice deepens.
Yes.
Anger takes a new shape.
Yes.
And then we all begin to receive and enter somewhat of a trance state watching this because it's real.
Yeah. Yeah. And what is real is not whether the words are factually correct. It's what's fully felt. This is really exciting to me because I didn't know you do that kind of thing. And there's 2 things that stand out to me in that kind of work, which also is work I do. Like the 2 things that stand out to me. One is when we keep close to the truth of what the animal of the body is saying, which is it sounds like you're coaching them to stay close to the truth of what the body's saying. Nobody knows where the story will go. The person whose story it is gets surprised by what comes up in themselves. Wait, I thought I was pissed that mommy and daddy aren't giving me the inheritance, but really it's the spanking I want so I can rebel and show them when I make a lot of money that I'm better. Wait, I'm competing with them. I didn't know. Like that kind of discovery is only possible when we stay close to the center. And then we are a mystery unto ourselves. I bet, you have that same experience where you surprise yourself. You're like, I didn't know this about myself. And that makes life so interesting. It also means that decision-making is different because like you don't really have a say. You don't make choices anymore. You just discover what the answer is. You just go like, oh, damn. Ooh, I guess I really like that kind of discomfort because my body's choosing it. Here we go.
Yeah.
The second thing is we have this very strong cultural, these emotions are the bad ones and these ones are the good ones. And when you start leaning intentionally into the ones we don't want, we start like becoming acquainted with the nuance of their flavoring and being able to approve of those, even with a little bit of an erotic twist.
Yes. Yeah.
All of a sudden, there aren't any bad ones. Yeah. It's just like, oh my God. It's just so exquisite being a connoisseur of your emotions. And something you said links to this. They can only control you if you're really, really rejecting them or they're foreign to you, right? That's when, like, you know, they're locked in the basement, they're banging on the door, they're making noise, they're scaring everyone. And that fear is controlling everyone's behavior. And you let them out, and first they're kind of crazy and out of control, but then you feed them and wash them off, and all of a sudden they're a wonderful house guest. You know, and they're like, oh, I can count on that aspect of my anger, or that aspect of my worry, or that aspect of my always disappointed self. I can count on them for certain superpowers. And it's this, I think, this like beautiful mythic way of creating a state that people call integrated and healthy and balanced and solid and strong. But for me, it's just like, I want the entire cast of characters. You know, I want like the brat in me. And I think, you know, coming from a background of BDSM role play, it becomes even easier to be like, oh yeah, that's that's like mistress self-indulgence over there. That's my inner spoiled brat.
Yeah, there's very few things that are as fun as like naming your fucking personalities and naming your shadows and naming them like really unique, exquisite, artistic names. Yeah. And allowing them space. Yeah, I agree and love everything that you're saying. I want to talk a little bit about your time in the dungeon. The BDSM. Yeah, there's like, so I've never ever role played any kind of dominatrix texture. It just hasn't been a thing that I've played so many, and I'm talking about like in the bedroom, like in a sexual experience. Of course, I've, in different improv and archetypal things, that's one thing, but like actually being the one to feel the other person's body so deeply that you can gauge in your own system how much is too much and how much is not enough. This is something that I heard you say once talking about. And it really does flip the script on the dom energy, right? Like you're the one that is being responsive to the sub in that experience. Yeah. So it's like, this seems to be the holy grail of how to have dom and sub dynamics, is that you're feeding each other.
Well, there's a kind of pejorative term in BDSM called the service top, and that's the top that's trying to make the bottom happy. So I like, in terms of, there are a lot of people out there who would say that's not what you do as a dom. I beg to differ, only like in the sense of, if you look at the yin yang sign, right? It's the side that's shaded that has like a circle of light, and the side that's light has a circle of the dark. That essentially, it doesn't make sense that a dom's attention wouldn't be on the sub, because you want to be looking at the effect you're having all the time, right? If you want to smack your submissive and you want to achieve a certain effect, you have to pay attention to what's happening as you smack them, right? You spank them too light, it's irritating. You spank them too hard, they shut down. So a subsequent smacks feel different. They're in a different state of consciousness. You get it just right. You want to get it. You want to have the effect you want to have, right? That like you're the doer in that moment. So in beautiful, natural harmony, you, with all the authority, all of the power, all of the decision-making, are absolutely 100% beholden to, you are in that tiny way a slave to your sub. Now the submissive is in control in only one way. They have no say in how their body responds. No say at all. They can't choose to shut down or stay open. This is what I hate about forced vulnerability on women or men. They're like, be vulnerable, trust me, be vulnerable, open up, open up. There's a level on which a person cannot choose that. And that is the unmistakable truth of the submissive. That is the unmistakable, unshakable, unchangeable truth. It is the unmistakable, unchangeable truth in ourselves. It is that body of the animal in the role play we talked about earlier, where like the truth of the body can't be forced. You can't just decide it's going to be a certain way. It's going to be the way that it's going to be. And we're all beholden to that. So in that sense, a sub carries all the power and none of the power, right? That's how power works. It's never only in one place. It's always interdependent. It's one of the beautiful paradoxes of power to begin with. I don't differentiate that much anymore between my experiences in the dungeon and out of the dungeon. So when you say you haven't had that experience in the bedroom, I want to be like, I can already tell, I'm just meeting you right now, but I can already tell that you give a great fucking massage, right? And like one of the most important things about that is being a good dom. Yeah. Without even a person when you're getting a massage, you don't feel like saying a word. But like if you can feel what the response is, if the pressure needs to be a little bit harder or a little bit softer, then you know. Then you know. And in that sense, this is now moving further away from my BDSM background when I talk about dominance and submission. I didn't have better words. I tried using yin and yang, and it really like fell flat. People were like, what? And in this case especially, I found masculine and feminine to be really distracting, really distracting, because I do believe it's like inhalation and exhalation. Everybody needs to lead and everybody needs to follow, and it changes moment by moment, and it's a present tense thing, and it's not a gender thing. And like over a long period of time, you may tend towards expressing it one way or another that one could say is more masculine or feminine. And there might be something there. But in terms of moment by moment interpersonal things, I need for the purposes of a teacher and being really, really as practical and direct as possible, for it to be about the present moment and attention and seeing the magic that happens when a woman can put her attention all the way out and make a request that has all the authority in it, and she can watch and see whether that smack is too hard or too soft or just right. And also, because now there's taboos in both directions, a woman becoming vulnerable, like so many women are like, but I'm in touch with my sadness. And really so much of the time they're actually crying tears of anger and frustration. Their anger circuit is so backed up that they can't even go inward anymore all the way. Like a good test of sadness is, does crying lead you to sob until your lungs shake off that excess grief? Like children do it all the time, and the reclamation of that whole range just means that later when you want to be heard or be vulnerable, that ask, you said it's really hard, you have to practice. Actually, you do this work and then it starts coming on its own. Although I do think that training is really fun and really helpful, especially if you have like a big specific ask to make. You grab your friends and you're like, I'm going to ask like a con artist. I'm going to ask like a clown. I'm going to ask like I'm breaking the law. I'm going to ask like it's the hottest thing in the world.
I love those practices. Yeah. Okay. So what about, I have several threads that are opening. What about if a woman is an ocean of tears, just never-ending ocean of tears. And obviously, perhaps there's been a lot of suppression and repression of that, and they're really backed up. And yet terrified to consciously go into those places over and over and over again because it feels like it swallows them whole. And yeah, this is just something that I receive a lot from people who are deep feelers and going through big life transitions, like out on their own again, and not in this very specific container, like a relationship where they can bounce things off of somebody and then move on to the next thing. It's like they're swirling in me, they're themselves. What do you say for them in that?
Well, first, it's always really hard to speak about a theoretical person. But
true. Fair.
But general principle, just from experience, what I would say is try the thing more intentionally, more consciously, with more erotic intent, and then try its opposite more intentionally, more consciously, with erotic intent. So the kind of sadness that's there would help determine the exact opposite. But it would probably be a more aggressive, outward, angry feeling, right? But the kind, right? Like you want to find like the complementary color. You know how like in the color wheel, there's like a resonance and then there's the opposite one. So if that sadness is a little bit more blue, then the opposite would be like a little bit more of a red orange, you know, like, so it's hard for me to say in the theoretical. But first, it would be weeping and like finding it hot. Just being like, oh my God, I am the saddest person in the world. Oh my God, I'm so forlorn. I'm so abandoned. I'm so whatever the words are, right? Whatever the feeling is. And then seeing what the opposite is, moving the energy in the exact opposite direction. And if that's difficult, then just going back and forth, because I feel like that lever, it ends up being like jimmying something loose. Things show up when you play with a thing and its opposite.
Love that.
In so many ways. Also, a general principle I use, because there's a cousin principle to this. The on switch is also the off switch. So if you're trying to break a habit or you're trying to end something, you also have to learn how to do that same thing consciously. So if you're like, you know, even if it's something dumb like biting your nails, I need to stop biting my nails. You need to set up a schedule with an alarm once every hour for a day, to the point where you're like, oh God, I have to bite my nails again.
Yeah.
The on switch is the off switch. And like the opposing emotions are really supportive of one another. And again, erotic intent goes a long way. I don't know what it is, and I can't speak to men because in this case, this is experience-based. But there's something about when women add a little bit of erotic intent to something, it just makes the alchemy so much faster, smoother. It's next level.
Yeah. Adding pleasure. I am safe to feel this. It's good to feel this. It's like you're toggling. You're toggling this sensation that is otherwise normally leading to a closure, a collapse, or a tightening around the experience. And then creating any kind of eros with something is a natural opening to it. So yeah, this is one of the more challenging things around in the somatic world, where it's like open to the feeling, open to it. Oh, can you open with it? Which I've also said quite a few times, because at a certain point you start to get it. But at the beginning, when you're experiencing, let's just say, shame or the feeling of being misunderstood, it doesn't make sense to open to it. But you add a little bit of fuck to it. Yeah. You know, just a little bit of fuck to it. And it's like, there's the opening. Yeah. There's the opening naturally around whatever the thing is, the shame.
It's almost like you warm it up a little bit so it sort of like expands on its own.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on like polarity? Super curious with polarity, especially in like
I kind of wanted to follow more about what we just said about the erotic, because there's a story I want to tell you.
I love it.
Okay.
Tell me a story.
So when I went to study in China for the first time with this one very specific Taoist abbotess, I went and it was a sect of celibate nuns. And I saw this woman, and it was literally like the air was bending around her. This little woman really felt like her body was the top 10% and 90% was underground. Like it was like her presence was so solid, it was mind-bending. You really did feel like if you would have to like tip over the earth to tip her over. And there's this great story. I don't know if it's true. It's an anecdotal story. Everybody there said was that in the 70s when the communists came to destroy the temples, she stood on the edge of like this plateau and looked at all these troops coming, and they saw her and they just looked at her and turned away. Whether that's true or not, it's believable. And I couldn't figure out what it was that, it was really scrambling. It wasn't until later that I realized that her entire route, that they do really subtle erotic practices, even though they're celibate nuns, to keep their erotic flame alive. And that when I went back to the US and I started looking at the energy bodies of all the women I saw, I realized, wow, it's like so much like an invisible corset, right? Like high chest breathing, like the animals in a freaking cage, in a cage. And so that was a really easy way for me to, this is going to sound strange, but de-eroticize erotic power or eroticize everything, right? Like life force, like all of it. That not having access to that erotic core is a way of amputating a woman from her power center. And it's so controversial to put erotic and power together. The moment you do that, you go femme fatale, dominatrix, like evil manipulative, Lilith, whore of Babylon, kill her, burn her. And even the idea just to, erotic and power, that means seducing people against their will, playing with their brains. Like if you look up, even if you just like do a Google image search for powerful woman, you get like a bodybuilder, a woman in a suit, right? Erotic power, you just get dominatrix boots. Like we don't have an image in our minds of a woman who's erotically rooted and therefore powerful. Like you can't picture, who can you picture? Powerful woman is dry, pussy dry, no erotic power. She's not actually powerful. And then when those two come together, we don't even see it. It exists. It's just we can't register it as like, wow, she's erotically alive and in charge. And not a harpy, not brittle, not angry. We don't have a role model for that presence. We can't process it. Even if you look at action movies, like people are trying now to replace those male roles with women. And it's like there's like we're in an awkward moment where we don't know how to do it yet. We don't know how to put power and eroticism in a woman in the same body. And we're confused about how much masculinity we have to inject in that. And I think that it's very, very, very necessary for us to kind of like reckon with this new archetype that needs to reemerge, not emerge, reawaken that ancient memory. Like, otherwise we're going to have fainting damsels and brittle harpies and people trying to figure out how to be their gender, like, tying your shoes poorly. It's getting messy.
Do we have anybody that's the closest to it? Is there anybody that you've seen that would be the closest example of that, like on the mass scale?
We've had this conversation in the school quite a bit, and we like nominate candidates, and they usually come in the form of celebrities. I'm trying to remember if I have one. Although she actually is a dominatrix. So I feel like this really, really, really contradicts my point. But there's this woman I absolutely love. Her name is Catherine Robbe-Grillet. And she is a master of erotic ceremony. And her erotic ceremonies are in museums in France. When I met her, she was an 88-year-old dominatrix. I think she's in her 90s now. She lived in a castle, chateau in Normandy with like 200 slaves. Submissives, and was very sought after for the art of her erotic mastery, her erotic ceremony. And I was very, very bold. I sought her out, and her pen name, she wrote a very famous BDSM novel called L'Image, The Image. Her pen name is Jeanne de Berg. So those BDSM fans will know who I'm talking about. I had the immense pleasure of being able to invite her to Paris, where my graduating class performed erotic ceremony in her honor for her.
Wow.
And watching her school everyone at the banquet afterwards, she held court like no one else.
Wow.
Just like everybody felt put in their place in the most beautiful way. And the whole thing was elegant and feminine. And we were all at the edge of our seats to please her, even the ones who didn't know why, And I'm sure there are examples that are more appropriate to your question, but in real time, that's the only thing that's coming up. And she's one of my heroes.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I really look for the beings who, like for me, it's not so, it's what I love about Florence and the Machine, Florence Welch. She's not leading with this particular kind of Eros. And yet, when I feel her transmission, when I feel her presence, she is so a woman in her erotic power. Like, the lyrics are erotic power. The way she moves is erotic power. And the way that she combines these themes like hysteria and ecstasy, that is erotic fucking power, like witch of the highest regard. I love Florence. Definitely a big muse. And yeah, it's so much on the media. What we see are these examples of reactivity to the thing.
Yeah, and also, oh, that's so smart. We confuse female erotic power with the performance of sexuality.
Yes.
And if you think about like, and we don't even have a radar for what male sexuality looks like. Like a woman going like wiggling around. She's like, oh, she's performing like female sexuality. A guy standing straight with literally a tie, like a piece of fabric pointed to his crotch. It's not regarded as a performance of masculine erotic power, but it is. Right? He looks like an erection standing there like that, right? Our radars for it are totally different. And you're right. Like, the performance of being turned on, the performance of being sexy is just the yoo-hoo.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally. Like superpowers and stuff, and like the women who are like, I don't know, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. This is the first example I'm thinking of, but like that kind of sexualization around a powerful woman who's got a gun, I fucking hate that shit. I hate almost all movies that are showing like the woman as the main like badass character and the way that she's performing the badassness. I mean, of course, it's like, yay, we're also on the big screen doing jumps.
Did you like Wonder Woman, the first one?
You know, like I did.
Yeah, but did you notice she was like a characture of the heart? I feel like feel like we're shooting in the dark a little bit. We're trying to figure it out.
Yeah,
I agree with you. I'm very, very, very looking for a powerful female action figure. And that earlier scenes in Themyscira, or however you say it, in Wonder Woman, where all the women are like, I'm really into it. I think we have a long way to go in figuring out, you know, who are allowed to be and what feels natural and what feels empowering, what feels right.
And what people have the attention span to watch, to handle, to watch. For sure. Like without all the insanity and the lights and camera and action. Like, how do we show up as woman? Where does woman exist in the media and in film? You know, I think in like social media we're figuring out, like, you know, there's plenty of people that are arriving and like really feeling what's the beat of my heart. How do I show up online in a way that feels authentic to me? And yeah, there is a lot of that reactivity.
I think we'll be a lot further along when you can show a live birth in a like a fictional Hollywood movie, and you can't show a beheading.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
Like movies are,
yeah.
That's what gets you an NC-17 rating.
Wow. Yeah. Oof. So, okay. So, as we're in the last 10 minutes, I do want to touch on polarity a little bit. I just want to ask because, I, for myself, having been in some experiences and some situations, I was very deep in the polarity world for, 4 years. And I integrated and then I moved forward. And I like really figured out like what is the way for me that I believe in. The problem that I experienced and where things can get really confusing with the world you're speaking about is when, as the feminine in this experience, the sub, you're in that role, and you're, okay, I'm going to be the feminine being, and all of my work in polarity is teaching me how to reveal and open my heart and show. And also on top of that, I'm trusting him to lead me to a place I can't lead myself. Like, that's where that playing equals power dynamic. And it's not that someone is trying to have power over necessarily. It just feels like two people in the dark trying to figure out something that is going way astray. And there were experiences that I had, several experiences where I was in a submissive role just by the product of being in a polarized relationship, not intentionally, just that's the way it is. And let's just say there was like a spanking that I didn't want. Yeah. But in the experience and in the effort to be like, this is taking me somewhere that I can't take myself. Yeah. The practitioner can become so thick that the body can lie. Yeah. You know? And so the body may be like, opening and enjoying.
Yeah.
But it's not.
But there's a disconnection happening
There's a disconnect.
Too.
Yeah.
Did you notice that before when you tried to ask me about polarity, I tried to dodge it, and now you nailed me with that question the second time with some context that makes it easier for me to answer? This is why I try not to talk about masculine and feminine in such fixed ways, because when you say the feminine, it means the literal woman is going to identify with that position in a way that is not a moment-by-moment body testing. It ends up developing a morality.
Yeah.
Like even if it was an absolute law and you're the woman, therefore you do the feminine. The moment you listen to something, some defensiveness, some reaction, or some resistance, whether that thing is coming up to protect or whether it's coming up because of a trauma, whether it should be there or shouldn't be there, it's there. Lying about it isn't going to help. When you attach a state in a fixed way to an identity, you lose the ability to discover. It fixes something in time. We don't know who we're becoming, who we are, why we're here. The moment you're like, you're a woman, you're submissive, practice submission. What's the point of being alive on this earth as a human being if you're not going to discover? If the 10 Commandments were absolutely right and they were easy to follow in a moment by moment way, we wouldn't need to live. We have to discover the laws of the universe. We are the laws of the universe. So I see a lot of women come to my school who are really into polarity. And I have to sort of challenge them to pledge fealty first and foremost to their own inner signal, even if it's wrong. Because the more you trust your body, the more trustworthy your body becomes. The more you listen to it, like it's more important for me for a woman to listen to herself than it is for her to do the right thing or do the appropriate thing or do the harmonious thing. Because I find that the more we trust ourselves, the more we relax into a space where we are harmonious with our environment. But first we have to be harmonious with ourselves. And also it's a lot of pressure to put on a man, especially these days, to lead. That said, a quick side note, I did an experiment with my mother, and this is me and my mother, 2 women, right? Where the thing that completely revolutionized our relationship is I had it that she is not to be trusted at all. And I have like a lot of good stories that I could tell you that would prove that one is not safe in her care.
You got the proof.
Yeah. Really like lock solid case, right? Like life in danger kind of shit. I did an experiment where I was just going to obey her energetically and literally for just 2 weeks when I went to visit her in her country. And
undercover submissive.
And it was really scary because I knew that if I actually was really hardcore about it, and I can be very, very hardcore, I could get myself into a lot of trouble. Luckily, the first guidance she gave was innocuous. It was totally wrong, really bad, but not lethal. And the wild thing is after about 5 days, she started saying things that she started being able to be a good mother.
Wow.
She started being able to read my body. I don't know where it came from. My mother is also just like, right now, I mean, this was a long time ago. She's a fabulous person. She's weirdly wired. She's an extraterrestrial, I swear. But she started meeping like messages that I could not have gotten from the world's best psychic or oracle. So there is really good evidence that a woman can surrender to a man and have his leadership rise as but I just don't think it's gender-based. There might be some really good gender-based things, but I'm going to leave that to the side because, again, the moment we get really ironclad about identity, I find that we stop being curious and stop allowing ourselves to be surprised. And I really, really believe that we are here to discover the truth or like remember the truth, not to come here and try to impose our opinions and structure on our experience. Everything I've seen that is of that nature ends up harming life, harming nature, harming the life force, harming the fun, harming the play, harming the art. You know, it's like that imposition is not necessary. We have to listen to nature speak through us instead of telling us what we think it should be.
I love this so much. I feel like this resonates really, really deeply. I don't know if it's in don't know which tradition it is. It might be Celtic, but to name a thing is to you basically put a period on it where there's no curiosity in what the thing is. I honestly don't know if it's Celtic or not, but I believe it was in Braiding Sweetgrass that I read this. But to name something is to put a period on it. And there's no there's no exploration on who this being is, what this plant is, who this animal is, what this human is. And there's a lot of beauty to naming things. There's a lot of beauty. It creates a whole transmission, creates a whole identity. It has the power to be used wisely. And it also has the ability, when you're naming things like feminine and masculine, to end all exploration.
Yeah.
And what you said that really resonates is moment to moment.
Yeah.
Moment to moment. And that is an ingredient in relationships that is incredibly important so that dogma is not built.
Isn't it the most important?
The most.
Because don't you find that in relationship, the thing that goes wrong is people forget to update each other and they think yesterday is the same as today. Like
And we stop listening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as a dom, you're like listening to the body of the sub. If you're just like, well,
and as a sub, you're listening to your body and reporting, you know,
exactly.
reporting back.
It all is rooted in listening and in self and in curiosity. And this is what, I mean, I bring in shape-shifting a lot, like our shape-shifting ancestors. And like, this is the basis of shape-shifting and how shape-shifting was like, how our ancestors survived. They survived the winter by becoming the fox. They survived the winter by becoming the bear. And by learning how to actually become the bear, break the bones, stretch the muscle, grow the fur, they could feel, oh, winter is coming.
Oh, wow.
Now is the time for us to tend, to gather food, to prepare. Like it's deep, deep, deep listening.
Wow. That really resonates. I've been asking myself a question and asking my students to ask themselves a question recently, because it really feels like there's a lot of escalation, right? And I keep asking, what are these times asking us to become? Who are we being asked? Who are being invited to become? And that the answer might be bear or fox or something that doesn't have a name yet, you know? But like, we are being invited to step into a future in response to what we feel is in the air.
Yeah, yeah. There is a whole new shape-shifting muscle that is being reborn that our ancestors didn't have to shape-shift into. Like, we are actually in the process of shape-shifting into something that has never been shifted into before. And we are going to break some bones, and we are going to stretch some muscle, and we are going to howl at the full moon and not hear any howls back and then hear a ton back. And like, can we walk through that fire of shape-shifting?
Lose our minds in order to come to our senses?
Totally. Totally. It's all like in service of creating somatic awareness so we can move through these times like us, like we're meant to, and also for generations to come. Yeah.
Agreed.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for this exploration with me. Where can people connect with you on the interwebs? And is there anything else, any final words you want to share as we close?
Can't think of any. I'm feeling pretty responsive to you. So without a question, I'm just like, I have a website.
I'm the same way.
WeTeachPower.com.
And your book?
Oh, my book, Unbound, A Woman's Guide to Power. Yes. It is a real walkthrough of the core process of the academy. So it's a way of being able to take a class without taking a class.
Love that. Always love that. And I just so appreciate you're very, very intelligent. Like, you're incredibly intelligent. And I really admire that, because I have one of those brains that's just like the art brain. And I'm also smart. I am. But when I meet someone who's like really academic, you know, your program's called the Academy. Like, you're very academic, but you're also pairing that in with so much about the body. You have like science-based evidence for why things work the way that it works. And I love women so much, and like, you know, to be able to serve women and grounding in their truth and feeling safe in their bodies, it's the holiest of work to me. So thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you too. And thank you.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today in this incredible podcast episode. Please go to Amazon. We'll also have a link below to Unbound and check out her book, and then also Artist of Love you can find. And we love 5-star reviews on iTunes. Oh my gosh, we love them. So if you loved this episode, please name it in iTunes. Say, I love this episode with Kasia. It was so good, 5 stars. Let us know what you loved about it. And we'll be back in 2 weeks for another episode. Thank you for being here. Bye. Okay.